Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we are pleased to have as our guest Mr. Laurence Reed. Mr. Reed is the president of the Foundation for Economic Education. He started there many years ago. He's been serving as a chairman of the board since 2008. He started there in the 1990s, I believe, and he did some writings and speaking for FEE, as it's called, as early as the 1970s. Today we'll be discussing progressivism in education, probably the hottest subject as far as I'm concerned, because I get so passionate about this. Mr. Reed, is he online yet? Okay, Mr. Reed has a undergraduate in economics. He's got a master's in history, so he's a well-rounded individual, unlike myself. Larry, thank you so much for being on our program. It's truly an honor to have you on our show.
It's my pleasure, Joe. I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, here is the book. Excuse me, Professor. I just received this about a week or two ago, and it's on my list for the next book to read. I haven't read it. However, I did review the presentation that you made to the Young Americas Foundation, YAF, and it briefly went through this book. And this is a real hot button for me, because I could never understand progressivism unless you are absolutely brain dead. And here we have the scholars, people who should be educating our youth to use critical thinking, to think, to debate, to critique, analyze, and yet the way they espouse the economic system is like, I'm going to tell you what the way it is. You accept it, memorize it, write it on a piece of paper, and live your life that way for the rest for eternity. And we perpetuate that. And I do not understand it. It's a bizarro world, and I hope you can help me out before I just sort of jump out the window to end it all.
Oh, well, I'll do what I can, Joe, but you're absolutely right. I mean, although there are a few exceptions, most progressives have one way of thinking, and they really don't want you to hear another side.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'd love to recategorize myself as handsome. All to say is I'm handsome, and I'm handsome. It's not that I'm, not so good looking anymore, but I'm handsome. And it's the same thing with progressives. They seem to say, well, since we are progressive, obviously you wouldn't want to be recessive. That's bad. So we are progressive. Thus, everything we say is progressive. And if you don't agree with us, you are recessive. Thus, it's bad. And it seems like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that makes absolutely no sense. Foundation in nothing.
Well, progressives have always been very good at stealing our vocabulary. Look at it this way. They're being consistent. I mean, they steal not only your property when they have an opportunity through government, but they steal your vocabulary. Yeah. I mean, the word liberal, which really today, in today's parlance, describes progressives for the most part, but that word barely a century ago meant pro-freedom, pro-free market, smaller government, but they appropriated that word too. But with the word progressive, this is particularly egregious, an egregious theft, because there's almost nothing about progressive that really would lead to progress, economically or spiritual progress or any other kind, if they were in charge, which unfortunately they often are these days.
Yeah. Would it be fair to categorize every single Republican, maybe with the exception of Rand Paul to a certain extent, but most of the Republicans, as well as all the Democrats, as progressives?
That might be a little sweeping, but I think certainly all but Rand Paul have at least accepted major elements of progressive thought. But some Republicans reject explicitly certain aspects of it, but almost all of them, of both parties, accept major premises of it, often without realizing it themselves.
Yeah. Well, you hear them. I avoid the debates, by the way, but every once in a while I feel guilty because I have a radio program and I should be discussing it, but I hate watching them. So I'll listen to them for about 15 minutes until I can't take it anymore, and then I leave the room. But they will say things such as, "I'm for repealing Obamacare, but replacing it. Repealing and replacing it." Well, wait a minute. You're going to have, instead of Obamacare, you're going to have Trump care, or what, you name it, whoever, Cruz care. And I go, wait a minute. You're going from one fire to the other fire. What difference does it make? Are they going to have some changes in bureaucracy? And you're going to have your friends in there and throw his friends out? Big deal. And no one seems to accept it. The commentators and the people asking the questions never say, now that makes no sense to me. Either you're going to repeal it and go to a free market, or you're going to tell us exactly what you mean when you say replace, and they won't do that.
That's right. They're really short on solutions. We have to replace or repeal Obamacare, but if any of them mean that they need to replace it or intend to replace it with some sort of top-down, centrally planned government contrivance, they're not going to solve the problem at all. If they mean replace it with free markets and personal choice and accountability, competition, the elements of a free society, then I'll listen. But you're right. Quite often they just have a scheme of their own to replace the failed scheme of Obamacare.
If their logic was right, I can have a lot of fun with life. I can tell my wife, "Oh, honey, I love you dearly. I'm faithful, but I'm going to the girly bar every night."
Yeah.
It's the same logic. If she's listening to this, I'm dead. I want you to know that, Larry, And she probably is listening in, so I should be careful what I say.
How do you know that your wife listens to your show?
Because she critiques me. She's an audiologist, and sometimes she has it on while she's seeing patients.
So you've got to be careful.
I have to be very careful.
Obamacare has given us a phenomenal lesson, if only we'll learn, in big government. I mean, from the word go, it's been sold to us as a batch of lies. You can keep your plan if you like your plan. You can keep your doctor. Premiums are going to go down $2,500 a family, and so forth. All of that stuff, which proved to be totally wrong, totally off base, just a batch of lies to sell the program. So what we ought to learn is putting government in charge of our health care is the last thing we want to do.
Right.
So I'm sure I speak for you when I say I'm not even listening if somebody tells me they've got another government program to put in place of this one.
Yeah. I went to my doctor last week for my annual checkup, and of course I had, you had to wait the obligable hour before, just sitting in the waiting room, although I was supposed to be his first patient of the day. And then once I got in there, the nurse saw me, took my blood pressure. That was another 15, 20 minutes and whatever. And I've known him for 30 years. He's a friend of mine. He's a wonderful person. He hates the medical system the way it is today. He wants out so badly. He's miserable. I really feel sorry for the guy. Right. And I said to him, I said, his name is, is Wayne. And I said, Wayne, let me tell you something. I said, I went to another doctor. Actually, it was a dentist. I said the other day, and I said, my appointment was at 8 o'clock. And I said, I got that 5 minutes to 8. They saw me exactly at 8 o'clock. They prepped me and whatever, because I had a little problem with my jaw and whatever. And 5 minutes after 8, the doctor came in, did all the tests and whatever. And within 10 minutes, we had the whole situation resolved. We knew what the problem was, et cetera, all the options that I had. And we talked casually for 5 minutes. And I said, I was 10 minutes early for my next appointment. I said it cost me $60, and that included all the paperwork. And then I said I was out of there by 20 minutes after 8. Now, he knew I wasn't jabbing him. He knew I was jabbing the system. And he said, and then he went on with his diatribe. And yet, everyone seems to be experiencing this. My Social Security, by the way, I know I don't look that old, but I'm still on Social Security. I got a $13 increase in Social Security. And I was ecstatic, $13 a month increase. And then a week later, I get a letter saying that my deductions have been increased by $149, mostly from the medical end. So actually, I'm down $130 or whatever for the month. And everyone's getting hit with this. Isn't someone saying there's something wrong with the system? Am I the only idiot running around saying, the sky is falling, or what?
Well, I think the polls show it. Most Americans would like to see Obamacare repealed. They differ on what ought to take its place, but at least they don't like the current program. And so I think it's really just a matter of time before the whole thing implodes. It's just a matter of what will the politicians do? Will they restore freedom in healthcare, which we really haven't had in decades? Or will they just give us some other top-down, centrally planned contrivance? Yeah. We can hope for the best, and certainly this experience with Obamacare should teach us that the last thing we want to do is to put government in charge of our health care.
I have many friends. I'm in business for myself. I have a couple of companies, a radio station, and I'm an investor in some small companies here in Tulsa. And I have friends who had pretty intricate websites built for their companies where they're interactive, where people can order online and whatever. I mean, not to the extent of Obamacare, the healthcare system, but it cost them a couple $1,000s. And they have a workable website that I think is just high tech. Has everything you can imagine on it, and yet we spent nearly $1 billion on ours and it doesn't work. Isn't anyone saying these guys are just taking money out of the till, having a great time, and no one's doing any work?
Well, there are people saying it. You and I are among them, and there are others. And some of us are pointing out, too, that, as I do in the book, Excuse Me, Professor, that in addition to the moral and philosophical reasons and economic reasons why we should not want government in charge of healthcare or meddling with it in any way, we've got the record of experience. Surely we ought to be asking ourselves, before we give government this massive new responsibility, why don't we find out how well it's done in the healthcare involvement it's already been doing? Well, Medicaid and Medicare are both in serious financial trouble. Look at the Veterans Administration. Many veterans are spurning that system, opting for alternatives because it's so lousy, and the corruption and the long lines and the lies coming out of the top ranks of the VA in that recent scandal of a year or so ago. That ought to tell us, if they can't get that little bit in healthcare right, what makes us think they can monopolize the whole system and make an improvement? It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, just 2 weeks ago, my little dog, I have 3 dogs. My wife works with the Animal Rescue Foundation, so we always have dogs coming in and out of the house. We have 3 dogs, and my little buddy dog is a little white dog. I don't know what he is. Some say he's a Coton du Touliard or something like that, or a Maltese mix or whatever. And he's the cutest thing in the world, a little button-nosed dog. And he sleeps with me and all that. He's my little buddy. And 2 German Shepherds grabbed him and actually sucked him right through 2 of the metal bars on our wrought iron fence into their yard and ripped them apart. And we were able to save him just in time. I won't go through the whole thing. However, in doing so, my hands were bleeding because I was bitten. And so I called my doctor and said, I figured I needed a shot or something. I was going to die of something, and could not get through. Waited 20 minutes. I ran over, got in my car, and went to a cash-only clinic, paid cash, and said, this is what happened. They gave me these shots and whatever, and I left. And I said, there's your healthcare system. I just summarized our entire healthcare system. I needed help. I could have had some whatever, and a contagious disease of some sort. And yet, the only place I could do it was the free marketplace where I've already paid. I could not get service. And this just happened last week.
Well, you raise an interesting point, because a lot of today's problems in healthcare go back to a government intervention during World War II, when there were wage controls imposed. And a lot of businesses then, in an effort to compete with each other for employees, they couldn't compete in offering a higher wage, so they offered health care benefits. And then later, the IRS came in and said, well, if your health care is provided for you through insurance that your employer gives you, well, then that's deductible to the employer, but it's not deductible for you if you pay for it yourself. So that gravitated the whole system in the direction of employer-provided third-party health insurance. And the moment you've got a third party involved, whether it be an insurance company, the government, or an employer, in picking up the tab for your healthcare bills, well, then you lose some of that sensitivity to price. You lose some of that personal choice and accountability. And so we increasingly moved in the direction of employer-provided health insurance, which screwed up the system for the last 50 years, leading to higher costs, which then was used as an excuse for government to ultimately give us Obamacare, which has only increased costs at an even faster rate.
Right. What was interesting, we have doctors on the program from time to time to talk about the healthcare system. Boy, you got to hear these guys and women. I mean, they're just and they have credentials to beat the band. They are dropouts. Every one of them are dropouts. And what I found interesting is we had one doctor. She was an otolaryngologist. She said only 15% of the doctors today belong to the AMA. She says there is a major dropout of all the institutions and anything aligned with government health care.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to see more of it. You're going to see more people choose another profession in the first place, or after they've even been a doctor for a time, they're going to leave. And that's because you've got, we're snowing them under with paperwork and regulations. They spend as much time in some cases handling government regulations as they do face-to-face with the patients they're supposed to serve. And that's got to be demoralizing to any provider.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we were on a flight somewhere. I don't remember when it was. It was a few years ago. My wife saw her one of her doctors on the plane, so she went up to him, said hello, and he says, by the way, I want you to know I closed my practice. She said, why? He says, I want out of the system. He said, and he got a job in a totally unrelated field. She couldn't believe it. And he was an MD.
Yeah. No, I think you're going to see more of that unless and until we can get government out of healthcare altogether. Yeah. I can't think of anything in history that government has taken over and which subsequently got better and became cheaper. It always raises the cost, reduces accountability and responsibility, increases fraud and political meddling, and reduces the choice that consumers have in the marketplace. That's just the way it operates.
But it increases the bureaucracy, it increases the deficit. You have more rich people, so you can have the poor people saying that there's too many rich people and too many poor people, so the government, the people that are in office controlling everything, making all the money, should do something about it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but you've explained it. I mean, there are a lot of these people, from Hillary Clinton to Barack Obama to advocates for government health care across the board, who think that the most important thing is to have government in charge. Whether or not it actually serves you, whether or not care improves and costs go down, are all secondary, distant second.
Right.
I mean, they want government in charge because that's validation of their, quote, good intentions. And they like to wield power. It's an age-old problem.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting when the libertarian candidates finally come out of the closet, which I'm waiting for them to do because they're not making much noise right now, and they're not, they're just not very popular. I mean, not popular. What's the word? They're not promoting themselves very well thus far. I guess they're waiting till 2016. It's interesting to see how many people are swayed over to that persuasion, which I hope is large. And I say this every 4 years. It never happens. Hopefully this year we'll see a sea change in that.
Well, time will tell. I couldn't predict. Who would have guessed we'd be where we are at this moment with Donald Trump sounding a lot like Mussolini, and yet ahead in the polls. I mean, anything can happen, I guess. When it comes to politics.
But I can understand. People say, well, they hold on. Why is Donald Trump so popular? I said, well, because people are fed up. They're fed up, but they don't know the answer. They have been educated in government schools. Government schools have convinced them that this is the way the world works. It doesn't work that way. Donald Trump comes in, annihilates everything that they've ever. He doesn't have the real solutions, but he sort of talks angrily as they are angry, and they identify with him. I said it's very, very simple. It's a psychological thing, more so than a political or economic or situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a tragic commentary, isn't it? On
It
yet
is.
another area where government has been all over the place in education. So you have people who go through 12 years of government schooling, and if they go on to, as many do, to a government university, they lack critical thinking skills. They fall prey to these bumper sticker candidates who just say, I'm going to do this, or believe me, or offer nothing but superficial slogans. And so many people seem to fall for it. It is rather discouraging, but I think it's the inevitable result of government education, which is not designed to teach things like liberty or personal character, but rather to teach obedience to the state as much as anything.
Right. How about this as a bumper sticker for me if I wanted to run for president? Vote for Joe, screw 'em all. I'll bet I'll get a lot of votes.
I think so.
Yeah, that sounds. I sort of like that. Preston, you think I should run or what?
I've always thought you should run. I think you should run again. Yeah.
I think he wants me to run away. He can't stand me anymore. That's why.
Hey, I'm not going to say anything.
You would get my attention, and for the very reason you cited.
All right, I got one vote.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I did want to mention, here's the book. It's Excuse Me, Professor. It's edited and co-authored by Mr. Laurence Reed, who's on our program right now. I have not gotten to that. I just received this last week or maybe 10 days ago, and I'm finishing up a book on free market existentialism, which is giving me a migraine headache, by the way, but I promise to finish the book. It's fascinating, but I have to read it so slowly because it all escapes me. But Susan, this is next on my agenda. I do want to mention that we have a call-in number, 646-652-4620. Let me repeat that, 646-652-4620. It's about 10 minutes to the hour, and so we're going to take a break in about 10 minutes. Please do call in with your questions or comments. I know we have people on the line, but if you want to ask a question,
Press 1, yeah.
Yeah, press 1. Press 1 so we know that you are one of the people on the line that wants to break in, ask a question, or make a comment. And please feel free to do so. Remember, 646-652-4620, and then press 1. Okay. Also, I failed to mention that in the interest of full disclosure, I have been a financial supporter of the Foundation for Economic Education for many, my wife and I should say, for many, many years. And I support the program. I suggest that you do too. You can go to fee.org, and sign up and contribute. They're doing tremendous work, and they're on the forefront of protecting your rights and your freedom. Please do so. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, my pleasure. Believe me. I mean, I get your magazines. I read the articles and your email and whatever. As much as I can. I'm going to go blind reading all this stuff someday. So I'm afraid.
Well, that's right. You probably have noticed we've undertaken quite a few changes at FEE in recent years.
Yes.
And we've been growing like crazy.
Yeah, that's
whether it be the students coming to our seminars, the web page visitors, it's just off the charts. And we've been very gratified. So thank you for your support.
Yeah. Oh, my wife and I, enthusiastic. I should say enthusiastic supporters, not supporters, but enthusiastic supporters. Now, what I'd like to do, we have about a few more minutes, and then we have the second part of the show. If you don't mind, could we go through the items that you discuss, the topics that you discuss in this book? And one that I'd like to throw out is the progressives seem to say, well, look at places like Finland, and Sweden. They have good societies. People seem to be doing well. The government taxes them very heavily. They distribute the money. They all seem to have a high standard of living. That's proof that progressivism works. So if we can discuss this book and also answer that question, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Right now, or do you have to go to a break first?
Oh, no. We have about 6-7 more minutes, so let's take one first, okay?
Okay. Well, I know a lot of people look to Scandinavia and they say, well, there you've got some form of socialism, progressivism actually working. But they don't look close enough to realize that what makes those countries work are those elements of free enterprise that they haven't taxed out of existence. I mean, they're pretty friendly when it comes to the business side of things, allowing for considerable innovation and investment and good returns on investment. The taxation is heavy on the consumption side, so that kind of helps them a bit. But you can't forget the fact that it's the long run by which things like progressivism and socialism have to be judged. If you undertake socialism or any of its variants, in the short run, it appears to work because you've got a lot of seed corn that was generated before that you can eat up. But if the long run trend is to eat that seed corn and to cause problems that end up putting you in the financial soup, then you might have a different perspective on whether it was the right thing to do to embark upon it in the first place. And the fact is, in all of those Scandinavian countries in recent years, they've realized that they've hit the tax wall, and that they were losing people and businesses, and the consumption taxes were driving people out. So they've actually slowed down, in some cases reversed some of their so-called progressive reforms. And believe it or not, in education, there's a lot more school choice in Scandinavia than we still have here in the US. So it's a mixed bag. So I don't think it's a really good example of progressivism in action.
Yeah, I've also read articles, but this is some time ago, that the people in Scandinavia aren't particularly happy. I mean, they feel kind of repressed, and I don't know if it's solely because of the economic system, which suppresses their freedom, basically, on what they can do because they're so highly taxed. But they're really not, they're not really happy campers.
No, that's right. In fact, there's a recent book that's been out less than a year that I can recommend on this very subject. You can get it at most bookstores or at least online from Amazon, other places. It's called Scandinavian Unexceptionalism. Scandinavian Unexceptionalism. And the author makes the case that this is not a welfare state paradise. They've had serious problems, and the smart ones are trying to undo the problems of the welfare state.
Yeah, but the progressives are very, very clever in taking one aspect, like healthcare, if they have free, a universal healthcare, and it seems to work. They say, there's proof that it works. It works there.
Yeah, well, they don't look at such things as, well, where are the great innovations and improvements coming from in healthcare? Are they coming from the countries that focus on redistribution, on welfare statism, or are those countries sort of grabbing on to the investments and the innovations of the freer countries? I think it's the latter. The United States, although this is slowing down now because of Obamacare, but the United States, with its, until recently, relatively free healthcare system, comparatively, has been the world's generator of new technologies, new innovations, and so forth that are saving lives everywhere. So if you start putting a crimp on that, a lot of these other countries, it's where it seems to be working for the moment, but that borrow heavily on our achievements, things will start to slide there too.
Right. Well, it was interesting. I'm repeating myself, obviously, first time to you, but I've said this before on the program. About 15 years ago, my wife and I had a business opportunity in Quebec. And so we flew up there, and we stayed at a hotel, one of the original hotels. It was, in fact, it wasn't in very good shape. I thought it would be, refurbished and whatever, but it looked like it was in disrepair, by the way. But we went to the hotel room, and it was exactly 6 o'clock, and the 6 o'clock news was on. So I got in, and I said, I am dying of curiosity as to what the number one headline is in Quebec. And I turned it on just my timing could not have been better. So I turned on, it was an old-fashioned TV, the old tube type too, which we didn't even have anymore, and I turned it on, the thing came on and whatever. And the headline was, how can the country best convert their healthcare system, government healthcare system, and integrate it back into the private sector because they were going broke. And it was the headline. And at the same time, our politician was saying we should look to Canada. And I literally was sitting on the side of my bed. I fell off. I mean, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, if I say this in the States, they're going to say, Joe made this up.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, it wasn't too many years ago when private healthcare in Canada was almost driven out. It was virtually illegal. Yeah. And then a Canadian Supreme Court decision changed that and allowed for competition in healthcare. And now, with a taste of it, a lot of Canadians are saying, we kind of like that. Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
We can see where private provision, private competition is a very healthy thing. It's too bad they had to go the wrong direction for so many years before they learned that.
Yeah, but apparently now the government is saying we can't afford this anymore. Maybe we should encourage more of the private sector, but how can we best integrate it? And that's interesting. Okay, maybe there's a good time to take a could we take a break now, Professor? Okay, how about right now we take a break? Could you hold on just for about a minute?
Yes.
Okay, we'll be back. Okay, Larry, thank you so much. Folks, stay with us. Remember, 646-652-4620. Press the 1 button. You'll come up on the board and you can ask a question, make a comment. But we're going to stop for a break and we'll be back within 1 minute. Thank you very much.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio, and as our guest today is Mr. Laurence Reed. He's the president of the Foundation for Economic Education, and we're talking about progressivism, especially in our school system. His book, Excuse Me, Professor, actually debunks all of the progressive ideology that sounds so good, runs so bad. And we're going to discuss some of the chapters in this book on the second half of our program. I guess the one and the biggest one is this income inequality that your girlfriend Hillary Clinton, keeps on bringing up. If you have a free market system, all the money will go to one guy, and he'll give out little crumbs to everybody else because everyone else is incapable of doing anything other than this one person.
Yeah, that's a very useful tool for demagogues, but it doesn't bear any relation to the truth. Yeah. The fact is that capitalism, free markets, has done more to produce a broad middle class than any other system known in the history of humankind. It provides opportunity. It rewards innovation and risk-taking. The fact is that when people are free to be entrepreneurial, to be themselves, they're not going to generate equal incomes. We're different one to another. Each of us, we're unique. We're special in terms of the talents that we have. We're different and special in terms of our willingness to work. We're different in terms of what we save and what we spend. All of these and many other factors are bound to create differences in income in a free marketplace, and that's not to be lamented. That's something to rejoice in. Why would we want people to behave or to live like robots? Everybody possessing the same, earning the same, irrespective of their contribution to the marketplace. What an incredible disincentive that would be for the talented and the innovative to go out and produce and take risks and employ others. So I rejoice in the fact that free people are different and free people are going to generate differences in income. So I'm not hung up on this inequality thing. I want to see more opportunity. I want to do away with the special privileges that some people get through government that disadvantage their competitors or the upstart newcomers. I want to get rid of crony capitalism, as sometimes people call it. But once you've done those things and you have a free society, free economy, I would let her rip and let people produce and earn what the marketplace says they're worth.
I have, believe it or not, I have a registered trademark as America's foremost corporate exorcist. And I used to give speeches all the time. I love doing that. It's so much fun because it's the antithesis of the way people think, and it's. I always have a ball, especially with the young people in the audience. You know, I just love doing it. I haven't done that in some time, but what's interesting is that now I also have an occupational health testing business where I used to be in factories all the time doing evaluations to find out what kind of services were required, and everyone there was miserable. I mean, most people in factories are miserable. And one reason why they're miserable is that they're told exactly what to do. They're told exactly. In other words, they're not free. They have bosses, and their bosses rule. And see, my perspective is that in my businesses, I work for my employees because if I don't work for them, they can't get their job done. I mean, it's very simple. And the world is upside down. But what's interesting is that these people who feel subjugated in their jobs because they're structured, want the government to structure it further so that the income is more equitable. Now, what I just said made absolutely no sense.
No, I know what you mean, but there are endless management styles. But the best business managers, and therefore the ones who tend to succeed, are the ones who recognize that employees are themselves unique and incentive motivated.
Right.
And so the best business managers are the ones who find a way to empower good people to go to town and produce. If you try to treat your employees like robots, you're probably not going to do very well. They're going to go someplace else.
Right, and it's interesting how we seem to want all the freedom in the world to do whatever we want, but then we want the government to control how much money we make and then control the marketplace so the other people don't make more than we do, and it doesn't work. I mean,
all it does is empower politicians, and then they can offer all kinds of special breaks in exchange for their votes and campaign contributions or what have you. People don't understand that when you put the government in this vast business of redistribution of incomes, of trying to equalize incomes, it simply empowers the politicians. They're playing with your money and buying votes with it, and promising to protect one class against the other, but they're the ones who really benefit from it, not you and I, or people who pay the bills.
Yeah, I think some of the more profound words that I found in your speech is when you said people are not equal, free people are not equal, and people are equal in the eyes of the law only, and people are not equal. So if they're not equal, they shouldn't really be paid the same amount because, as you say in your presentation, and I assume in your book as well, is that everyone has different desires and needs and outlooks on life. Some people are very happy just to go to a job 8 to 5, make minimum wage, go home and watch a basketball game. Other people are driven to work. So not everyone's equal. Could you walk through that as you did in your presentation to the Foundation Youth?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
This is a principle that I like to talk about a great deal, and it has two parts. One is that free people are not economically equal. We've kind of touched on that already because of our differences. But the second half of it is even more important, and that is that equal people are not free. I mean, think of it this way. If you came to me and said, okay, Larry, your job is to make everyone in society economically equal, and I'll come back in a year and see how well you've done at that. How could I possibly do that? If I had to make people equal, I couldn't do it by just giving speeches and telling people, it would be nice if you didn't earn more than the next guy. So if you get to that point, just either quit working or just give up every additional dollar in wages that you might be paid so that you're equal with the next guy. Nobody's going to do that. Everybody wants to improve their well-being for themselves, their family, and their friends. The only way you could make people equal economically is if you put a gun to their heads and told them, don't be better than the next guy, don't produce more, don't meet customer needs better than the next guy, don't take any additional risks, don't be different, don't be better, just be, Joe Ordinary, and don't excel at anything. Well, what kind of a society would that produce? It would be a disaster. We'd all have equality in mediocrity at best.
The people who are the loudest voices in equality, I'd like to turn the tables on them and say, let's assume you decided to have a small business, a secretarial business, whatever it is, whatever you're good at, you'd like to do. I said, now, if someone came to you and wasn't particularly qualified, had low skill levels, how much would you pay them? And they can never answer the question. They go, I probably wouldn't hire them. I said, you wouldn't hire them? I said, that means you would pay them nothing. Yeah. They said, well, I would wait for someone who's qualified. Well, now you're prejudicing one person. And we go down this yellow brick road, and it's amazing how confused they are because they're starting from a very illogical base that has no substance and doesn't work in reality. And in fact, that they would violate their own principles, so to speak, in doing exactly what they say everybody else is doing, but should stop.
Well, progressives in particular, Joe, are notorious for not doing with their own money, with their own personal behavior, the way they would impose on other people. Look at it this way. I mean, they're big advocates for more government in social welfare, okay? But whenever a progressive has money to give away, and by the way, as a group, they give away less. They're less charitable than libertarians and conservatives even. Whenever they have a chance to give away, they don't write a check to the Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, they're out there always saying, the government is superior when it comes to meeting social needs, but they don't donate their own money to the government. Right. If they give anything at all, it also is to private charitable organizations, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, or their church, or whatever. Instinctively, they seem to understand that it's a bad deal to send more money to government. But they somehow forget that when they advocate policy for all of us. I think often they're more motivated by just government punishing people, taking from those who seem to have more. That's what motivates them more than doing good with the money once the government has it. Therefore, redistribution, regardless of the outcome, just so as to be able to punish the rich and the successful and all the boogeymen that they spend so much time talking about.
Yeah, I'm very, very selfish. I pay my employees well. Whenever there is extra money, because a job went well or we get, money comes in, I take that money and I don't take it for myself. I give it to the employees.
Yeah.
And I get bonuses. I said, your salary is not going to be the highest salary, but when you add it all up with the bonuses, and every month someone gets some bonus one way, shape, or form, regardless of how much money went they, even if I have to take it out of my own bank, out of my own pocket. But I do it because I'm selfish. I want them to stay. I want them to be happy. I want them to be productive. I don't want them to quit. So I work for them. And something? I have employees working for me for 15 years. I mean, that's unheard of in my industry.
Yeah. I think in the long run, what benefits workers the most is a free and healthy competitive economy. Not every employer may be, say, as enlightened as you are. But if you've got a free labor market, where not made rigid by government regulations, then you've got opportunities for workers to say, I think I can cut a better deal someplace else. Or maybe I'll start a business myself. Maybe I can do better that way. The key thing is give people choice and opportunity and don't punish them for success. And in the long run, that's going to benefit everybody a lot better than any kind of top-down, politician-driven, central planned economy.
Well, I tell my employees, I said, I would never go in this business. This business is yours. I hope you have fun doing it, because I mean, do I look that stupid that I would go into this business? And they laugh at me, but they understand what I'm saying. They say that you are in business for yourself. You may get a paycheck from me, but you are in fact in business for yourself. If you can make yourself $100,000 on the job and I only make $5,000 a year, God bless you. That's the way it should be done. You know what? Because I'm happy. I have a brand new car. Not brand new. It's a 1996 Subaru with 7,000 miles on it. It runs fine. I'm a happy camper. I don't need any more than that. And they know that. and it just seems to work out very, very well. I've never had a real. I've had employees who have stolen from me, and stolen big time. I mean, literally shut the company down where everything went out the window, and that was my fault for not being more careful in who I hired. But I have never had anyone quit on me because the work environment was poor, the pay was poor, the benefits, none of that. So and overall, it's been a real great ride.
Well, all you have to do is look around the world. Which countries tend to do better in terms of feeding and clothing and housing people at the highest levels? It's not the centrally planned statist societies, it's the free economies. And we have endless examples of where socialism has wrought great destruction, and then a free market is introduced and it solves problems hand over fist. Look at Hong Kong after World War II.
Right.
It's gone from 750,000 to 7.5 million people, from an economy that was based on just a rock and no resources other than a good harbor, to now having well above the world average in gross domestic product, largely because of a free economy. And Ludwig Erhard did it in Germany after World War II. You had a flattened, defeated, devastated, occupied country. And within a decade, with largely free market policies, West Germany became the richest country in Europe.
Right.
You don't have that with socialism. I heard Lech Wałęsa in Poland one time, when he became president, he put it well, when he said that socialists take aquariums and make them into fish soup. and then he said, now I'm in charge and I've got to undo that. And he says, what I've got to do is to take fish soup and try to turn it back into an aquarium. It's not very easy. Socialists leave a lot of wreckage in their wake.
Yeah. Do you know, you mentioned Poland. We have in our office, my wife's audiology office, we have an original poster from that time.
Oh, you do?
Yes, and I don't know, I don't remember where we've had it for a long time, but I'll bet you it's worth a little fortune today, because there's probably very, very few that survived, and we had it framed and how big, and it cost us a fortune to get at the time, and today it's probably worth even more, and it hangs there, right there in the, and everyone says, what is that, and we explain it to them.
Yeah, well, I might be able to go one better. I visited Poland in 1986 when the communists were still in power, and I spent a couple of weeks there with people who were active in the anti-communist underground.
Wow.
And they were printing stuff, that was illegal, distributing it, literature of freedom. And before I left, the group of printers, underground printers I was with, told me that they wanted me to find $5,000, get it into their network in Paris, which would ultimately get it on to Poland, so that they could translate and publish illegally in Poland for the first time Milton Friedman's Free to Choose.
Wow.
Well, I got the money quickly, got it over to them, and in my house is a copy of Free to Choose, autographed by one of the leading Polish dissidents of the 1980s, that I helped to bring about, and I'm very proud of that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that story. That's heartwarming. Now, we have about 15 minutes or so, a little less than 15 minutes. In this book, you also talk about the Great Depression, because progressives love to bring this up. They say, well, if it wasn't for Roosevelt during the Great Depression, we would still be in depression, and little do they realize that he was the cause, him and not Harding, Hoover were the cause of the Depression, and or sustained the Depression and actually caused it with the Federal Reserve. I'd like for you to walk through that, because it's an absolutely fascinating story.
I'd be happy to. In fact, on our website, fee.org, we have an expansion of a chapter in the book, and it's entitled Great Myths of the Great Depression, and it goes into it in more detail, but that's condensed into a chapter in the book. And there I point out that the Great Depression was started in the first place by a failure of the Federal Reserve, of the central bank. It was government monetary policy that put us in the fix. From 1924 to late 28, we had a very expansionary, easy money policy, inflation of money and credit by about 65%. And that produced a bubble. You saw it on the stock market, you saw it in the land boom in Florida. We called that period the Roaring 20s, because government was force-feeding the economy with ever-cheapened money. It drove interest rates to all-time lows. It was forcing a bubble into the economy, which burst in 1929 when the Federal Reserve changed its policy. Instead of expanding, it contracted the money supply. From 29 to 33, it contracted the money supply by about a third. So that did more than just let the air out of the balloon. It collapsed the entire economy. But then on top of it, in 1930, with Hoover still as president, you had the passage of the Smoot-Hawley tariff,
right,
which raised tariffs on foreign goods coming into America so high it almost closed the borders. It flattened all industries that were dependent upon the import-export trade. It took a recession and made it a depression. And then 2 years later, they doubled the income tax. This is still under Herbert Hoover, who the progressives love to falsely claim was some kind of a laissez-faire, stand-pat, do-nothing, limited government president. He was all over the place with government intervention. And when Roosevelt ran against him in 1932, he attacked him for raising taxes, raising tariffs, presiding over, and these are FDR's own words, the greatest taxing and spending administration in American history. But then when Roosevelt became president, he did just the opposite of what he promised. In the campaign, he'd even promised a 25% reduction in federal spending. But instead, he doubled spending in his first term. He raised taxes to all-time highs. And the result, along with other interventions that he put in place over the next few years that the chapter deals with, he prolonged the Depression by some 7 years. So just the opposite of what the progressives would have us believe.
Right. And they also believe that the World War II brought us out of the Depression. That's not exactly true.
No. In fact, a lot of this depends on, well, how do you define depression? If you look at, say, unemployment, the unemployment rate, the official rate, declined dramatically during the war. We took 11 million men, drafted them, took them out of the labor force and sent them to Europe or the Pacific. That helped the official numbers. But in terms of actual living standards of the average American, at best, they stagnated during the war. We were diverting resources, as arguably we had to win the war. So instead of making washing machines and automobiles and so forth, we were making planes and guns and tanks. We didn't really get a genuine recovery that the average American could feel and benefit from until after the war, when we got a massive reduction in government spending and a tremendous reduction in business income taxes. Harry Truman in 1945, reluctantly I might add, this was kind of forced on him by the Congress, but he signed into law in 45 a dramatic reduction in the top business income tax rate from 90% down to 38. That was a big factor in the post-war expansion. We got less government, not more. And yet the progressives completely overlooked that.
Yep. Well, it actually was a twofer, because at the same time, all the other industrialized nations were decimated by bombings, both in France and Germany and Italy and England and whatever. And so there was a limited amount of manufacturing capacity. So all these countries, especially with the Marshall Plan and whatever, needed goods. Where do they go? Well, they had to come to us to make those goods. Thus, all the factories built up. We had full unemployment because we were not only supplying the needs of our own country, we were supplying the needs basically of the world, including Japan.
Yeah, when you bomb a lot of your competitors' factories, their customers have to go somewhere. So we did get a bit of an artificial lift, temporary, from that as well.
Maybe that's what I should do to my competitors. I never thought of that, I should get an old Spitfire and just bomb them, No, I guess I can't do that. But the progressives love these. Why is it that they will not look into the history, read history as it actually happened, and not take the sound bites that they're asked to memorize? It's almost like the Mao Tse-tung, where everyone had to memorize certain lines and made no sense, but they memorized it, and eventually that memorization became their reality. And the progressive seems to do the same thing. And if you present them with facts, all you do is get anger. You never get, well, geez, I didn't know that. You get illogical responses, and I can't understand that.
Well, typically progressives have a higher goal, at least it's higher in their mind, than truth. You and I are focused on truth. We want to know what really is fact. But in their way of thinking, regimenting society serves all sorts of wonderful objectives. Putting smart people in charge of the power apparatus to regulate and push others around, to create a better society by plan. I mean, that's their ultimate objective. And so if they have to rewrite history along the way or ignore history, or interpret it in a way that fits that construction, they will do it, because truth to them is kind of a relative concept. It's sort of whatever you believe, whatever serves their objective. These are end justifies the means kind of people, and so that works its way into their thinking.
Yeah. Now, the freedom movement, your organization, this radio program, and a plethora of others, of course, Jacob Hornberger, I'm sure
Yes.
you know well.
Yes.
He's a regular on our program, and I can go on in ad nauseum. But we're fighting a headwind because we're getting the word out, but yet all of these students every day are going to government schools, and the teachers are products of the government schools and are not thinking as you and I are talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're thinking like, well, they accept everything that is told to them from the government. They pass this on. We're on the losing end of that, and how do we change that? I know these organizations such as the Youth Foundation, for example, and the Students for Liberty, and there's several
Yes.
others that I've been to and support. How do we get out of this maze?
Well, the network of organizations and people who are working on this very thing, Joe, trying to counter what's taught, provide what's not taught in typical K-12 schools, that network is growing by leaps and bounds. And the success of it may not always be apparent, but I see it every day. I see young people being turned on to these ideas. I see 10, 11, 12 years of bad instruction being undone at a single seminar. Of which we do 12 every summer and lots of shorter programs all throughout the year. I see lights going on in young people's minds. I know we're making a difference when they say things like, I never heard this before. Why didn't I hear this? Give me more. I'm seeing that more and more often. And these days we can use technology like we never could before,
right.
To simply do an end run around the establishment, the education establishment, go right around the hostile teachers, hostile administrators, work with the good and friendly teachers and administrators, but where you've got the hostile ones, you work right around them and go right to the student. They're coming to our website, whether they have good teachers or bad. They're coming to our seminars, irrespective of the instruction that they're getting. Right. It's how we, in the liberty movement, are marketing liberty that's going to make a difference, not so much what's being taught by those who aren't of our persuasion in the public schools.
Yeah. Well, what I do here is a labor of love. There's no income at all for me whatsoever. In fact, but I have to do this. I mean, I've been doing it for years. I think this is I've been about 14 years, President, somewhere around that, 14 years. And I have my own studio, and I used to be with a major station here, and I sort of got a little fed up with their ideology, and they didn't, although I had very good Arbitron ratings compared to the station, which was real surprising, and yet they couldn't think, they didn't particularly care for my ideology, and they wouldn't have me co-host anything. They wouldn't let me touch anything, So I told them, I said, look, I'm out of here. I'm going to open my own studio. They said, what do you know about opening a studio? I said, absolutely nothing. But I'll find out when I get there, and I'll call you, which I did, And that's how I did this, and it's all out of my own pocket. But I feel compelled that I have to do something. Everyone has to do something. And that's why I am where I am today.
I applaud you for that, Joe. I think time and again I try to reinforce with people that good people who understand liberty and what's at stake cannot give up. We can't be pessimistic. We've got to do what we know is right. You want to go someday to your reward, being able to look back and say, I may not have solved everything, but once I knew what was right, I committed myself to it, and I did all of my power to see that those right ideas were exposed to as many people as possible. Yeah. What else can one person do?
Right. Yeah. You can't. One person can't change the world, and if they do, they're doing it under a repressive regime. So you don't want that to happen. We do have about 2 more minutes left, and so I'd like to give you the next couple of minutes for you to wrap up.
Okay. Well, I'd like to encourage your listeners, Joe, to visit FEE, our website, which is fee.org. We have almost 70 years of fantastic content that's easily searchable. We've got new, fresh content going up every weekday. We're committed to the ideas that made this country great and to expressing them in an ever more eloquent fashion, and especially in a way that appeals to young people. So please visit fee.org, check out our bookstore. That book that we've been talking about, Excuse Me, Professor, would make a great Christmas gift, a great stocking stuffer.
Right.
And there's still a week and a half to go before Christmas, so lots of time to get that.
All right. Well, I'd like to offer my services. If you ever have a conference and you have some really high-powered speakers, but you want the other speakers to look even better in comparison, you can invite me, okay? And I would be more than happy to donate my time to give a presentation at a Liberty conference. It would maybe be a little unusual, a little bit different than you're accustomed to, but I'll be more than happy to donate my time. All you have to do is ask, and I'll be there.
Hey, that's very kind of you, Joe.
Okay,
yes.
And I want to thank you so much for being on our program. You're a fabulous guest, and I do hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Oh, anytime.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Larry, thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye now.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Folks, this is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends. Let us hear from you. Our email just as comments at libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.